Welcome to From Head to Heart and Home. We are so excited that you're here with us today to listen to this conversation. This is a channel created by women for women, empowering you to take intentional action in creating the life that you want, with your host, Carla Center, subconscious healer, and myself, Shanda Soretti, certified coach. So today, Carla and I have a really exciting topic. I mean, we always say the same thing, right? Every week they're exciting topics because they're what's actually happening for us and our clients and what we're noticing and what we're witnessing. So today, Carla, why don't you open with what we're talking about around stepping into your power?
I'm excited because for a long time, for me and what I see my clients have, we are like, life is happening to us, right?
Mm.
And you and I have talked many times how we create our life. But the thing is that we do have power. And we do have a choice to give away our power and say, somebody else, fine, just whatever you want. Or we can step into our power and make our own choices, right?
Mm.
The days when it seems like nothing's going right, you have to remember the whole time you have choices and you do have the power. And even in relationships, you have the power, right? It's not somebody has power over you. You get to still make your choices. You step into that power and say, this is what when we talk about from head to heart and home, this is what's right in my heart for me, right?
Yeah.
It might not be what's right for the other person in their mind, but that doesn't mean it's not the right thing for you. And when you step into that,
Yeah.
things open up.
Yeah. I love what you're saying around relationships, especially because, well, some people might be like, well, no, I don't have a choice, right? Like, I'm here and this is what's happening. These are my circumstances. This is what's happening to me. It's like we always have a choice. So, in that example, it's a choice to stay, it's a choice to leave. So, if we can really distill down and simplify kind of what we're talking about, I would really say that. Um, our power is our choice, right? Our choice is our power. So if we want to get real nitty gritty, that's the bare bones of what we're talking about. Your choice in everything that you do and don't do, whether you're choosing to do something, you're choosing not to do something. Those are still choices that you are making. Sometimes we don't realize that by not doing something, we're making a choice, or vice versa, doing something, we're making a choice. And it's like, no, every action we take is a choice. And here's the
Right.
cool thing, every choice either brings us closer to or further away from what we want to create. So, what I get my clients to do, and I think it's really cool because it's just really simplified, a simplified way to see how their life is kind of unfolding for them and then getting them ready to take those reins back, is like kind of a tally. So every time you make a choice and it moves you further away from what you want, it's a tally against you, right? It's a tally for what you don't want. And every time you take an action that leads you closer to what you do want, it's a tally for your future goals, your dreams, your desires. And so it makes it really black and white to see like what's happening, right? And it also will show you where you're defaulting to. Like, are you defaulting to yes? Are you defaulting to no? Are you in inaction or are you in action?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I love that. And the inaction is absolutely a choice. Even if you don't consider it a no, it is by default a no.
Yeah. Right.
And yeah.
Yeah. Being like passive, sorry to cut you off, but like being passive and not answering a question or saying yes or no is also a choice. And then what happens then is somebody makes a choice for you,
Yes.
right? Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yes.
I
No,
wanted
no,
to.
no. And that's one of the biggest way. I mean, many of us women have been taught to be passive and just
Mm.
allow somebody else to make the choices for us because we don't want to be in conflict or we don't want to be thought of in a negative manner. And we continuously give away our power in that way because letting somebody else make our choices for us is us giving away our power.
Yeah.
And I see it all the time where these very strong women who make like some huge choices in their life outside of their relationships. When they're in their relationships, and this was me, they're very passive and allow their power to be taken away. And we allow it, by the way. Can somebody take our power away? Not without our allowing it,
Right.
you know? And so that indecision, that, and Shanda said it many, many times, you do know. When you say, I don't know, you do know.
Mm.
And that indecision that's part of like, okay, I'm just going to give them my power so that I don't have to deal with what I perceive as being negative
Yeah. Yeah.
or uncomfortable.
And like it's going further into what you're talking about, speaking into being a woman, how many of us don't want to be perceived as a BITC, boop, you know?
Mhm.
Like we don't want that. I
Right.
was like, it's like terrifying that men or your friends or your family or your loved ones will perceive you as being this B word, right?
Mhm.
And so we will like relinquish our our choice and our power to kind of to downplay ourselves, right? To play smaller than what we actually are and what we actually want. And so for me, I'm like, how can we discern between being a bee and
Mhm.
being like a queen, like being a boss, like boss
Right.
lady, right?
Right.
There's a discernment there. And I feel like the line might even be quite thin, but
Mhm.
there is definitely one versus the other. They're not the same,
No.
even though
No.
they share some similar qualities.
Right. And what I often say in that, when my clients are like, "Well, I'm not sure. Where are you coming from? Are you coming from a place of reacting, or are you coming
Mm,
from a place of compassion and love while having your power?"
yeah.
There is a big and it is such a thin line, but when you come from your heart and you have compassion for the other people, there is nothing wrong with making the choice that's right for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you're talking about, Carlos, so much because the visual that I just got from I'm gonna say that's like the two B's. The one B is the beep and the other B is like the boss lady. Okay.
Mhm.
And so we have the perceived bad B and the good B, right?
Mhm.
And when we come from that place of love, when we come from our heart, when our actions are genuine and authentic and from our heart, it's like we're able to show up in a different capacity and resonate in a different way to people rather than when we have a broken heart, meaning we're still wounded, we still have triggers, we're still operating from our past, right? We're not yet doing all the healing work that needs to be done. That's when we get to be perceived as the B, right? That we don't
Mhm.
want to be because we're not coming from our heart, we're coming from our head, which again, how wonderful is it that it all ties into the theme of this channel, even from head to heart and home? It's all about getting out of that head where all of the overthinking and the discomfort and the doubt and the back and forth and the not enoughness, like all of that, all of the limitations are in your head. No limitations are in your heart. Like, hear that. No limitations are in your heart.
That's beautiful. And even when you think that you want to do something and then you're like, oh, maybe this isn't the right thing. If you're coming from your heart, there won't be resentments.
Mm,
That's the same thing with when you come from your heart, when you've stepped into your power, doesn't mean that you're like so black and white on things. It's
right.
not. You come from your heart, there's always gray area on stuff. And when you come from your heart, from this beautiful, loving, compassionate place, you find an answer that doesn't lead to you resenting the other people, you being exhausted emotionally, physically. When you are in your power, you're that boss lady that loves people, but also is in her power. You are not full of resentment, exhaustion, fear. You're full of that love and compassion and excitement about life.
Yeah. Um, Something that I think is really, I'm just taking a note here so I don't forget it, is like really important because we always talk about like the before and the after, like before we start healing and then once you start healing, right? Not that there's an after you're healed, but once you started your journey, right? And you're far enough
Right.
along that you've created some major shifts. We still like I will totally share, like, I still do things that I don't want to do necessarily or don't enjoy doing. But the difference is that it's definitely few and far between now. And I get to reframe what those things mean. And here's the simple example that I use: doing the dishes, cleaning the toilet, vacuuming. Like, if I was honest, I'm like, I don't want to do those things. Like, I'd rather do some of my woo-woo stuff, you know? But I
Mhm.
get to reframe what doing those things means. So again, we've talked in the past about being versus doing. So if I get out of the doing, which is in here, all the tasks, right? And I drop into my heart and I'm like, okay, who am I being while I'm doing these things? So for me, my partner and I just talked about this the other night. We both do dishes, right? One of us cooks, the other one usually does dishes, or sometimes maybe somebody's not feeling good, or maybe somebody had to work late and we just help each other, and it's like it's unspoken, but we talk about it right afterwards, and it's really special because it's like I get to do these dishes. I might not want to, but I get to do these dishes for my family, right? Like, I get to do these things for my family. And when you can come from that place, it's so different and there is no resentment. And so
Right.
my partner and I have this funny thing that we share with each other when we do the tasks that maybe we don't like doing, that we do often. Like, these are daily tasks. So dishes, wood, those are the two that are coming to mind right now, packing lunches, stuff like that. And
Mhm.
or doing the laundry. Like, I don't mind doing some of these things, right? Anymore. I used to when I was younger, loathed doing these things.
Mhm.
Like, the laundry would be built up until I had no clothes left, kind of thing. The dishes would be piled up until I had no dishes left, right? So these were the things. But we call them the fairies. We're like, oh, the wood fairy was here today, or oh, the laundry fairy was here today. And it just makes it fun and playful. And so we kind of get out of our heads about it and we're able to kind of laugh, right? Because we know that these are tasks that need to be done and they're shared, but we typically do the same tasks. He has this set and I have this set for the most part, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And in my household, same way, except for I have an older child. So the three of us we work together. And
Yeah.
sometimes one does more than the other, and it really depends on what's going on with us. But
Yeah.
we've learned to like work together, and instead of, because I was raised to believe the woman does the work. And
Mm,
so if somebody tried to do it for me,
yeah.
I was resentful, like I didn't do it right. And I was always angry and like,
Mm,
you know, and so that's where it is. Like, I didn't have the discussion. Shanda had the discussion. Now I've had the discussion. But if you don't talk about it, and that's where we're talking. I mean, you didn't make the choice together if you're just doing it and you're just
right.
mad about it,
Right.
right? Or even if you did make a choice, you can always speak again about, hey, listen, this is what's going on
Mm,
with me. Can I get some help?
yeah.
But we get those ideas in our head and these beliefs that things can only go a certain way and that
Right.
they'll never change, and that somebody's not willing to help us because maybe in the past somebody didn't help us.
Yeah. And speaking, like, again on stepping into your power, being able to choose and discern and all of these things, stepping into your power also means being vulnerable, right? And so on the other side of actually taking the initiative to do these things and share these responsibilities comes the gratitude and the thank yous. We are so big in this house for thank yous. It doesn't matter you know, if I'm doing the dishes and he comes and says, thank you for doing the dishes. And it's funny because I'll catch myself saying, you don't have to say thank you. And then I'm like, oh, hang on a second. Let me receive that. You're
Yes.
welcome. Right. And so it's really important to receive those thank yous, but we're dishing out thank yous all the time. Thank you, wood fairy. Thank you, dish fairy. Thank you, laundry fairy, like all the time. And it,
Right.
again, when we acknowledge and give gratitude to those things, it honestly makes it easier to do them. Like, it's not a thing anymore. We don't have issues with doing specific things. We just do them and there's no issue. And it's like, wow, I've had very, very, very different experiences with that in the past in other relationships where I wouldn't say I wanted help, or I wouldn't say that, I feel like I'm carrying the brunt of it, or so on and so forth. Right. So I didn't use my voice and stick up for myself. And the resentment was real, let me tell you. Right.
Right.
And then it's interesting because that resentment doesn't come out in the, I always do the dishes. That's how it starts. And then that snowballs into 17 other things that aren't even relevant to that conversation. Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I was the same way. And I see this with clients too. And when you finally you're building up these resentments because you're not having communication. Why? Because you're afraid of how they'll react. When you
Yeah.
don't know. You
Yeah.
don't know, you've made up a story in your head. But then some one little thing, and the
Hmm.
other person is like, I have no idea why you are so angry about this one little thing.
Yeah.
Well, what it was is like all these things are all building up within us. And the whole time it's draining our energy, by the way,
Mm.
guys. That's part of the exhaustion. It's not just part of what we physically do, it's holding in all of this stuff.
Yep.
And we're giving away our power, which zaps our energy. And then we, whoa,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's like if we okay, so we're talking about power. So let's stay on this and play with this for a second. This power, positive, negative. If we don't give our power positive attention, it is going to come back tenfold in a negative attention, right? It's going to come out. It's going to literally escape our lips because we're going to reach a point where we're like, I can't keep it in anymore. And we're going to say a whole bunch of things we wish we didn't, right? So it's like, let's correct that. Let's get on top of that before we get to that point. And I'm not saying you're never going to feel resentment again, because yeah, sure, you will. But again, you will address it. You will reframe it in your mind. And just by asking yourself a few simple questions, you might be able to solve it in your own head without even needing to have a communication with somebody, right?
right.
Right. Or
Right.
sorry.
Because the truth is we all have stories going on in our head, by the
Yeah.
way.
Do we ever?
Whatever your story is in your head about this thing that you're resenting them for, probably is not even close to what
Yeah.
they have. And so you can either resolve, sometimes you can resolve it, like Shanda said. And if you can't, have a conversation because it's probably their perception of what's going on is probably not even near the same as what's going
Mm.
on for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And the validation part, so typically most of us run where we seek the external validation. Okay. We don't trust ourselves. We look to others for the answers. We might look to our partner for the things and, everything in between. When you start the healing journey, when you're far enough along on your journey and you've had some aha moments and again made those shifts, you're able to turn inward for your own validation. You don't need to seek that external validation anymore. And I'm telling you, that is a big part of personal power when you no longer need someone's approval. And that goes back to what I was saying just a minute ago about the conversations, right? Like Carla said, if you're not at that point yet where you can have the conversation with yourself and learn the lesson in your like inside of yourself without needing to communicate with somebody, then have that conversation with that person, right? But not from a place of it's your fault, I'm mad at you, blah, 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 blah. Not from that place. That's not what we're saying, but we're saying communicate and share how you're feeling. That's it, right? But once you've made those shifts, you won't need to get into as many of those conversations because you will resolve it within yourself. And that's so powerful. Is like, think of all of the things in the past that you've had to speak to somebody, connect with somebody to be able to move past it. It's like, no, no, what if we just get to go within and seek our own solace inside of ourselves and validate ourselves and heal ourselves?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Because there is so much when we are in our power, there is so much in us that we don't necessarily give ourselves credit for. Like our happiness is absolutely 100% our responsibility and not
Yeah.
somebody else's.
Yep.
And that's part of the stepping into your power is realizing it's not somebody else's responsibility to make sure I'm happy, their actions. And so that's all part of that. Like it's internal.
Right.
There's so much that we have inside us that we have somewhere along the line, we have taught ourselves to be disconnected from ourselves and
Yeah.
to look outward.
Yeah. And that happens with trauma, right? And
Yeah.
trauma is simply put, trauma is not that it's simple, but simply put, trauma is anything that changes how you act in your life, how you show up, who you be, right? And
Mhm.
actually, this is great because you know how normally I'm like, I know this quote, or the quote kind of was like this, or whatever. I actually have something on my phone that I read this morning and I took a screenshot of it. And I'm loving that it's coming into this conversation right now. So I want to share it. And it's around what we're talking about right now. So imagine being bitten by a snake. And instead of focusing on healing and recovering from the poison, you're consumed with finding and catching the snake to find out the reason why it hurt you and to prove that you didn't deserve it. This is not about the snake, right?
Right.
I just thought that was so powerful when it stopped me scrolling. I was like, whoa, that is so good. So, you guys on the healing journey, you're with us, we're with you. Rewind this recording and listen to that quote again. And it didn't say
Mhm.
who wrote it, but so powerful. It's not about the snake, it's about us. And
Yeah.
as long as we are trying to find that snake and blame that snake and make the snake wrong and make the snake listen to us, we're giving our power away,
Right.
right?
Right. And the whole time the venom is just eating us up
Oh yeah,
and
it's
eating us up.
coursing through your
Yeah.
veins and spreading.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and further than that, it spreads outside of you. When you
Yes.
speak in a negative way, when you show up in a negative energy, when you have negative relationships, and that you're like, what I mean by negative is like low vibe, like really, right? Like your energy
Mhm.
is just not coming off as good to other people, like
Yeah.
positive. It brings everything around you down with you. So be aware of that, right? And it doesn't take a lot of work to shift that, right? There's something about smiling, and I read that even faking a smile will increase your like your joy or your happiness by like 30%, even just faking your smile. So, if that's what you have to do for a bit, then I say let's do it. Let's put on a
Right.
smile.
Right. Because it's something we can control and it's a choice we can make. And
Yeah.
that's part of the thing is that we're we're allowing something when you're saying you're looking for the snake, that's you're giving your power to the snake. You're searching for the snake. Not you are not focused on you at all.
Mm,
Only what has been done to you.
right. Yeah, so you're
And
focusing on the negative, you're focusing on the past. You're focusing on life happens to me. This is what happens to me. This is what was done to me versus the healing process. What can I do to move on from this? I can tell you, I will tell you that I was stuck in my snake poison for years, literally from when it happened, which was around 5, all the way up through into my 20s, stuck. And I will tell you that what started as like a little puddle turned into a muck pit, turned into like a swamp, and then turned into like quicksand. I was literally sinking in this poison. I was beginning to drown in it. And I got to a point where my back was against the wall and I was like, listen, I need to make a choice. I looked at my life and I was like, whoa, this is not where I thought I would be, which, hey, that's okay. But I'm like, no, no, this is not healthy. More than I'm not where I want to be or where I thought I'd be. I am not healthy. I am not in a good place. I'm not in a good way. And I need to, and actually genuinely want to figure out somehow to start shifting that.
right,
Yeah.
right. And for me, like the biggest thing happened when I was 30, the same spot as Shanda. Like I lost everything
Mm,
because I was so much in the things that had happened to me in childhood and then continuously, by the way, if you don't change it, you may change partners, but you will continuously make the same relationships because you are doing the same things,
yeah,
right? And so I kept doing that. Maybe I pulled myself up a little bit, but until you make the other choices, you'll still pull that stuff back in. So it's about your power. And I didn't get that. Like I had a psychology degree, I was doing all kinds of stuff, but I was left and right giving away my power.
yeah, yeah. There's it's like all of our shame, all of our broken pieces, all of our fragments are opportunities to let love in, to lead with love, to step into our power and take it back and be like, no, I'm choosing this from now on. Even though this happened, even though I went through this or experienced this, I'm still choosing this because this is what feels good in my heart. Because
Right.
ask yourself the question, right? For everybody who's listening, ask yourself when you're in that resentment, when you're in your story, when you're in your past, does that feel good in your body? Like I can remember like what that's like. And it's like suffocating, right? It's
Yes.
like heavy and it's uncomfortable and then there's so many like things that bubble up when I can like remember back to what that felt like. I'm like, that doesn't feel good. And if something doesn't feel good, that is the wisdom of your body telling you it's not in alignment. There's something better. There's something else, right?
Right. And mine came out as anxiety because I let shame and guilt control everything
Mm,
instead of love, like Shanda was just talking about. And that's that thing when you're like, oh, I think I'm doing great.
yeah,
When you're having stuff happen, think about, am I letting shame, guilt, something control it, or am I stepping into my power? Is my heart really in this? Am I really stepping through fear, or am I like, ooh, I don't want to upset anybody. I feel guilty because of what might happen or whatever. And that's disempowerment.
right.
Shame and guilt are disempowerment at its best.
Yeah. Yeah. And interestingly enough, too, I want to share like some more personal stuff. I think this is really good that we're sharing from our personal lives too, as real examples, because I remember like when I first started doing some healing work and I thought that I had healed some stuff, but I hadn't. I had just shifted my focus onto something else. So I wasn't kind of like living in that muck and mire anymore necessarily, but I wasn't doing any work to progress through it and heal it. I was like, oh, okay, we're going to move over here now. And so I found that similar things. So, like control, for example, the control was like really heavy over here. And then I noticed I kind of let go of that, like with a relationship in my family. And then it shifted to my food. And I was like, oh, how interesting that now I'm using food in ways that I hadn't used food before. And so it was like really, and it took a while. It did not come right away. It was like actually a few years. And I was like, oh, well, what, wait, whoa, wait a second. This is not what I thought it was. So I kind of had to go back from a very different perspective, mind you. So it was very different. And the healing came quicker, but I had to go back and do some things over. And it's okay, right? Like I didn't shame myself for it. I didn't make myself wrong. I was just like, oh, how interesting that that snuck by me and I didn't even know
Right.
it. Yeah.
Right. And that's why we talk about awareness all the time, so that you don't make yourself wrong.
Mm.
Awareness is huge. It's a way of communicating with ourselves about, that's something that I thought I had shifted past, but it snuck its way in.
Yeah. And like and I think you'll be able to speak to this too, Carla, with the energy thing is like for me, I manifested a lot of like ailments, like physical ailments in my body, like sore this, sore that. Like, oh man, if I could tell you what I was like at even just 30, right? So almost 8 years ago, what my body was like, it was bad. It was really bad. And I would, think that I was healing one aspect and be like, oh, okay, that feels good now. And I'd be like, oh, now my back hurts. And then I'd work on that and then I'd be like, oh, now my shoulder hurts or my arm hurts. It was just moving around in my body because I wasn't processing it fully. I was processing it, but I wasn't seeing it through. And that is the important part about, experiencing your emotions all the way to the end.
Right, exactly. And mine, in my 20s, it was had to do with my female organs and my digestive system. And then it moved into 3 years ago, my rheumatoid arthritis was so bad I could barely use my hands.
Mm.
Couldn't I walked like I was an 80-year-old woman. Because my hips were just tight and locked, and the and I got all these steroid shots, and I did everything, and it was the energy work that I do that made the difference. And I was just excited about it because it helped me with my anxiety. Like, anxiety was always such a huge thing for me. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. And so honestly, if my hands start bothering me, I'm like, ooh, there's something up. There's something I'm not addressing. I
Uh-huh.
listen to my body. I don't go, oh my gosh, let me go take some ibuprofen. My first thought is, okay, what am I not addressing?
Yeah. I think it's really cool because I'm going to touch on what you just said about like when your hands or your wrists act up, you're avoiding something and it's manifesting. For me, I had an accident and I got whiplash, and since then I had TMJ. And so it's interesting because once we create or have the experience of a weak point in our body, right? So if we actually have like an accident happen and we then have like a weak point in our body, that is where becomes the point of entry. So for me, like Carla was saying about her wrists, it's my jaw. So when I start to get a really tense jaw, I'm like, okay, hang on a second. What's happening? What's going on? What am I not looking at? What am I avoiding? Right. And so it's always my giveaway, either in my jaw or like the base of my skull where it meets my spine, is my other spot there. So those two were connected. And so listen to your body. Like, ask yourself the question, where are my weak points in my body? I know mine. One is my elbow, like I said, my jaw, my neck, and the base of my skull and my back. I have a couple, had a few accidents. But so when they flare up, it's no longer like, oh, let's get some Advil, Tylenol and make it go away. It's yes, let's comfort it, but let's do a little deeper work and ask some deeper questions to try and resolve and get to the root of what's actually happening behind this pain.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that you see, and I'm sure Shanda's seen, I've seen in my clients where miracles have happened because they've addressed their stuff. And that's why we talk about stepping into your power, because it makes not just impact on your relationships and your own happiness and joy and all of that, but it affects your body in a huge way.
Yeah. Yeah. Personal power is like how you create miracles, like Carla pretty much just said. Like, do you want a miracle to happen in your life? What if it really only takes you reclaiming your power and stepping fully into your own personal power from a place of authenticity, vulnerability, love, connection, compassion, right? And courage, because it does take courage. And we're not going to feel ready. I talk about this all the time. You're not going to feel ready, but all you need to feel is willing or curious.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Because you never hear us say comfortable, because
No,
our comfort zone is what has kept us where we're at.
exactly. Yeah. So before we close this conversation, is there anything that you would like to share and maybe like a supportive tool that you used in the past, or maybe a really thought-provoking question? I love thought-provoking questions to kind of help people um, move into rather into their personal power. What would you say there,
Right.
Carla?
So one of my things that I have done and I've had clients do when it feels like there's a lot of avoidance, um, we can always trace back to where that started, but what are you trying to avoid? Write that down. Journal about what you're trying to avoid. What is it? Is it conflict? If it's conflict, why? What is it about your perception of conflict that you're trying to avoid? Um, or if you're doing stuff out of shame or guilt, why? What is your fear that's going to
Mm,
happen if you step into your power instead of following the shame and guilt?
yeah, it's beautiful. I love it. And I want to repeat what I shared earlier for an action step for all of you who are listening who love the homework, to do the tally, to start taking inventory of the choices that you're choosing, known, unknown, right? Start to pay attention to that and notice how many times you work against yourself and how many times you work for yourself and your dreams and your desire and your future. So I'm going to close with that. And I want to thank you all so much for tuning into our channel today from Head to Heart and Home with Carla and I. We're always so happy to have you join us. And if you enjoyed this conversation, then give us some likes, some thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe by hitting the button below. And also feel free to share this episode. If you know somebody else who is playing small or hiding, then share this with them, right? Especially people who who have ailments, physical ailments, or autoimmune, then these are the messages that we want to share with them too. So thank you so much for being here, and we will catch you next week. Bye bye for now.